Hey guys, what's up? And today we're going to be doing a mod guide for the new Nerf rival Phantom Core Hades. Okay, so starting obviously with taking the blaster apart, there's going to be 3 different screw sizes. There are 2 larger ones in the front, as you can see here marked by the tape. There's 2 smaller ones, one on each side in this little fake hexagon thing on the plates, and then the rest are a standardized body size. So for this, you're just going to need a flathead screwdriver, just a real small guy, and basically what you're going to want to do is towards the front, you're going to basically apply a slight amount of pressure and wiggle it back and forth until it sort of gets in between that crack, and then you should be able to just simply pry it off, as you see there, and then the piece comes off very easily. And then this is just the same size as the normal body screws for the blaster. So if you need a reference to put the blaster back together later, this is what the internal should look like. Pause the video now if you need to put that back together. Okay, so the first piece I'm going to be looking at is this little lock right down here. Basically what that does is when the blaster is primed, it catches on the various notches that are down there and stops you from, I guess, double feeding it. But it also creates that ratcheting prime, which I really don't like, so I'm going to be removing that little orange piece and the spring associated with that. If you plan on using something that's like a very heavy prime, you might want to keep that in. However, I'm going to be keeping it fairly light because I want to use this for HVZ, so I'm going to pop that piece out. Then I'm also going to be removing this piece right here. That acts as the safety and catches when in the down position on the back of the trigger to stop you from pulling it all the way. However, the one on my blaster is fairly loose, and I've had some issues with the Artemis one where I put it in the safety mode when I did not mean to, and almost got tagged because of that, so I'm just going to remove it. I'm going to keep the external pieces just so that there's not a hole in the blaster, but it won't actually do anything now. So it's at this point of modding, if you wanted to swap the spring for, say, like a cut-down K26, you would remove the front turret section via these screws. You can lift it out, and then you can replace your spring. I'm not going to do that just because I want to keep it easy to prime for HVZ, and the FPS limits for the games that I generally play in are fairly low, so I'm going to keep this as a stock rival, but if you wanted to do that, you can replace that now as well. So up next we're going to start prepping our shell for the paint job. First we're going to separate the pieces by using a small flathead screwdriver to just push those out and separate the different shell pieces. Then I'm also going to be taking my 2-part mixture epoxy sculpt. I'm going to mix that together in equal portions, and then I'm going to use that to fill in a lot of the logos, like where the names of the blasters are and the warning text and like the Nerf logo and all that stuff on the various places of the shell, and then I'm going to leave it to dry overnight before we start sanding it. So this is what the piece looks like with the putty fully dry after 24 hours. And then I just started sanding with a low grit sandpaper, so I started with around 100 to 120 just to mostly remove material without really scratching up the part too much. Then I'm going to move to a higher grit just to smooth it out before priming and painting, so you can sort of see the in-between stages here. One piece that did give me a lot of trouble is actually this back section. It's glued on pretty tightly and it's hard to remove, so instead I did the putty work first, and then when I go to paint it, I'm going to just tape off the whole thing and go from there because it's not really worth the effort of removing it. Okay, so for painting this blaster, I'm going to start off with a standard gray primer, then I'm going to move on to my main colors depending on what part of the blaster I'm going for. I'm going to be going with mainly this purple, then silver and black as sort of the secondary colors. I'm going to do some weathering, so the purple will be a bit darker when it's finally done, and then we're going to top it off with some matte clear coat. So these 2 pieces I had to tape off using some masking tape because I wanted the main parts of them to remain either clear in this case or black, just because they weren't easily detachable and I didn't want to break the parts, so I taped them off and then gave them a paint, and they came out pretty good. Just some small touch-ups, and then we'll do weathering, and then it should blend together a bit better. I wanted to add a little more complexity to the shell as it was pretty boring being totally purple, so I'm adding a black section to the top, and I'm going to do that just by using masking tape to get the bottom half that I want to keep purple, and then just a little bit of newspaper for this long section that doesn't need to be painted. But then for this front section I'll repaint it black, and then I'll let that dry for a little bit, then peel off the tape, and that should give me a 2-tone towards the front, which should break up a large section of the purple. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the first couple layers of paint. The application's pretty smooth and it looks pretty good to me. However, for this blaster, I want to go with more of a worn paint job just to sort of mix things up a little bit. It's cool like this, but I think it would look cool if I darkened up the purple a bit with some dry brushing and then also on the silver. So for that, I got a black and a silver metallic acrylic paint and then sort of a rough paint brush, and what I'm going to do is put a little paint on the brush, wipe most of it off, and then just start dry brushing, mostly around the edges, stuff like that. Less is generally more with this thing, but I'm just going to give it some little scratches here and there, and the weathering generally helps some of the paint pop a little more, and you know, you can add some extra details this way. So before we clear coat, we're going to do that, and then we'll move on to our clear coat and then reassemble it. Okay, so I just went through and did some black and silver dry brushing to the blaster. I think it gives it a good amount of character, as you can see with the black section. The silver kind of makes it pop a bit more, and then on sections that I thought would stick out and potentially get damaged more, I did heavier dry brushing, and then on parts like towards the middle of the shell, there's much less. It's more just to make some of the little crevices and details pop a bit more, and then towards the front where you might handle it a bit more, I did more weathering, same with sort of the stock region. And the other bits, I really like how the black and the sort of silver turn out. It makes it look almost sort of like a gunmetal metallic. I wouldn't use it for the whole blaster, but for accent pieces, I think it makes them really pop. Feel free to experiment with dry brushing or weathering. There's a lot of different techniques you could use. For example, you could use the brush. You can apply it with like a rag or something and then wipe it off, and that gives it more of a smeared look. Feel free to mix paints. You know, that's one thing I really like about the weathering process is there's so many different ways to go about it. Not really a wrong way, and you can sort of make it as unique as you want it to. Also for the orange bits, what I did here is I took some light grit sandpaper, I went over them just to remove the sort of shine that a lot of these stock pieces have. Then I did some very light dry brushing just to sort of make some of the sections pop a bit more, but that will help keep a good chunk of the blaster orange while still fitting with the theme of the blaster. So up next we'll clear coat this with a matte clear coat, and then we'll throw it all together and see how it looks. So this is the blaster in finished state. As you can see, the clear coat sort of dulled it out a bit, which I really like about the matte clear coat. I just went over it with a bit of lubricant in like areas like the pump grip and the slide rail on the top, where there's a lot of contact between painted parts to sort of make it smoother and to avoid the paint scratching and having my fake scratches get real scratches. Anyway guys, I hope you really enjoyed this mod guide. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to answer them. And as always guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video.